Oh no, folks. It seems as if Chicago didn't really want to spend $12 to watch this preseason game in person. They didn't want to see the epic return of their number one star that got traded away coming back. I mean, these tickets were going for $7-8, $6.50 in some places.
Everything was set for a grand return. The lights blazing, the court gleaming, the scoreboard alive, and the arena waiting as Chicago welcomed back Angel Reese. The self-proclaimed Chi Barbie, who spent the last 2 years insisting she was the driving force in women's basketball, was stepping back into the city that built her spotlight. This was meant to be her defining comeback, the perfect reset, the kind of night headlines are made from. But when the moment arrived, something was missing. The crowd that was supposed to embrace her simply never came.
Watch this. Uh-oh, now look, it's our time. Listen, when Caitlin had her preseason game, y'all wanted to come put stuff in our face and clown us. Well, guess what? Now it's time for y'all to get the same treatment. So tell me why in Angel's first preseason game, and it went exactly how I told y'all it would, she shot 28% in the paint. 0% from the three-point line. Every three she threw up there, clank. And then from the free throws, she made 4 out of 8. She had 8 free throws. They was free. And she only made half of them. Pathetic.
From the opening tip, the game itself revealed the truth long before anyone checked the attendance figures. Angel Reese stepped onto the Wintrust Arena floor for the Chicago Sky's first preseason clash of 2026 against the Atlanta Dream, but the night unraveled almost immediately. She went just 2 of 7 from the field, left 4 of her 8 free throws unanswered, and closed with only 8 points in a brief 13-minute outing. That is no exaggeration. 2 made shots, 4 missed free throws, and a stat line impossible to ignore. For a player who has spent the last 2 years presenting herself as the centerpiece of a franchise, that type of showing draws instant attention. And when it comes to Angel Reese, every detail gets magnified.
She decides to let her ego get in the way. That's where she's going to be dangerous and destroy the team. And I'm being honest here because honestly, she's literally the same player from last year. She's the same player from the year before. She didn't really change that much, man. She's the same exact player, okay? As long as she can score 0 to 5 feet and don't miss layups, she will be fine. But I don't think it's the game on the court is the issue. The issue is, will she be willing to accept a role player position? If she accepts it, she will be fine. If she don't, there's going to be huge problems. This is going to be called Atlanta nightmare afterwards. I'm telling you, that's what it is. It's going to come down to that. Is she willing to accept her role? Because I said this before and I got hated for it, but I don't give a damn.
After a heavily publicized offseason move to the Atlanta Dream, this matchup was framed as Angel Reese's much-anticipated debut against her former team. That alone carried unusual weight, returning to the same building where she had once been suspended, standing across from an organization she had openly challenged, in a game where Chicago had every reason to be curious about her next chapter. The setup was built for drama, for headlines, for a packed arena ready to witness every second. But the city delivered its answer before the ball was even tipped. Inside Wintrust Arena, 3,000 seats remained empty, an unmistakable silence in a venue that was expected to be electric for precisely this occasion.
Now, if I had to take a guess, behind the baskets, they said, you guys don't need to sit here. Let's actually file you in to the hundreds, to the 100 sections, and we'll move you towards center court. So on TV, it actually looks like there's more people in the building than it actually is. So I'm assuming that behind this backboard, you see that it's empty. The upper deck, you see that it's empty. But I would also assume that behind the basket that we're getting this camera angle from, it is empty, and the upper deck is empty. If I had to take a guess, 1,500 people in the building? Maybe 1,500?
The reaction online was instant, as it always is when moments like this unfold in public view. Within an hour of tip-off, photos and videos of the wide stretches of empty seats were spreading across X, TikTok, and Reddit, fueling debates everywhere. The comment sections exploded, 3,000 empty seats for Angel Reese's return, followed by a 2-for-7 shooting night. For many, that contrast said everything. Some viewers were stunned, while others acted like they had expected it all along. No matter which side people took, the image itself was undeniable. Empty seats do not bend to storylines or protect reputations. They simply reflect reality. And on April 29th in Chicago, those 3,000 vacant chairs delivered a message loud enough to echo far beyond the arena walls.
It's been a while, and I'm sure you came back to a sellout crowd that could not wait to see you. Or not. Only 6,724 fans showed up to the Wintrust Arena. Yeah, it holds about 9,500 fans, so we're talking roughly 3,000 fans away from being sold out to see the return of Angel Reese and the
Here is where the situation becomes more complicated, because this was not the first time this pattern had surfaced. Looking back to May 2025, Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky played a preseason exhibition at the Pete Maravich Assembly Center at LSU, her former college home and the arena where she won a national championship and became a nationally recognized figure. Despite the significance of the setting, the upper bowl was never open because the lower section could not be filled. Tickets were being resold for as low as $11 and around $15, yet large sections of seats still remained empty. The images from that night quickly spread across social media and continued circulating long after the game ended. A similar situation unfolded again in 2026, but this time in Chicago, where the same lack of turnout became part of the conversation in her own market. While Reese publicly expressed gratitude for her opportunities, appreciation for the fans who did attend, and confidence in her experience with the team, the broader context surrounding her career was already taking shape. There was a growing sense of a pattern that was difficult to ignore. When her 2025 season came to an end, it did so in disappointing fashion. The Chicago Sky finished with a record of 10 wins and 34 losses, missing the playoffs for the second consecutive year and ranking among the weakest teams in the league. That result represented more than just a poor season. It reflected a difficult stretch for a franchise that had entered the period with expectations of competing at a much higher level after building around her as a central piece of their future. The team's collapse on the court was only one part of the story, because off the court the situation became even more complicated. Angel Reese made comments in a Chicago Tribune interview suggesting the organization needed significant roster improvements or she might reconsider her long-term future with the team. The franchise responded strongly, ultimately suspending her and labeling the remarks as detrimental to team cohesion. A mid-season suspension of a player by her own organization over public criticism is not a minor detail. It becomes part of the narrative that follows a career. That situation carried into the off-season and was followed by her departure to Atlanta. Further reporting indicated that Reese questioned whether certain teammates could lead a playoff-caliber team and believed the roster needed a major overhaul centered around a small group of core players, including herself and Camila Cardoso. She expressed frustration with the results of the season, emphasized the need for higher-level talent, and acknowledged that while she preferred to stay long-term, she would consider other options if the situation did not improve. By the time the 2026 preseason arrived, Reese was back in Chicago wearing Atlanta Dream colors, and the storyline surrounding her had only expanded. The franchise exit, the suspension, and the lingering questions about the end of her tenure with the Sky all formed part of the backdrop. Beneath it, however, remained the most consistent criticism of her game since her rookie year: her shooting efficiency, particularly her inability to consistently finish around the rim. That aspect of her performance has remained the focal point for analysts and critics alike, resurfacing repeatedly regardless of rebounds or defensive contributions. Over time, the discussion has centered on the idea that while her rebounding numbers are strong on paper, a portion of those possessions come from recovering her own missed attempts rather than generating additional opportunities off teammates' shots, creating a statistical profile that looks more complex when examined beyond the box score. Concerns about Angel Reese's rebounding have long been tied to a broader discussion about how those numbers are generated. Since her rookie season, analysts and fans have pointed out that while her rebounding totals are undeniably strong on paper, a noticeable portion of them come from recovering her own missed attempts rather than securing second-chance opportunities created by teammates. That distinction has become central to how her production is evaluated, because it changes the interpretation of what the stat actually represents beyond the box score. One of the most frequently cited examples of this pattern came during a game against the New York Liberty in May 2025, where a specific stretch of play drew widespread attention. In that sequence, Reese missed 8 shot attempts while still finishing with 12 rebounds, including 5 offensive boards collected within a 19-second span. All of those came directly after her own missed shots, creating a rapid cycle of repeated attempts at the rim. That clip circulated widely across social platforms and quickly became a reference point in discussions about her game. Analysts, commentators, and casual viewers used it to highlight the contrast between surface-level rebounding numbers and the efficiency behind them. While the rebounding totals themselves are legitimate, the way they are accumulated adds complexity to how the overall performance is understood. That sequence never really left the conversation, and when Reese shot 2 of 7 from the field against the Sky on April 29th, adding 4 missed free throws to the mix, it only reignited the same talking points. She finished with 8 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 steals in a game that, on the surface, could still be framed as a solid all-around line. But the efficiency told a different story that fans and observers were quick to highlight. The contrast between the box score and the actual shooting performance became the focal point again, especially as reactions online picked apart the numbers without hesitation. What makes the shooting conversation so persistent is not the volume of attempts but the nature of them. She is not being criticized for difficult shot creation or low-percentage perimeter attempts. Instead, the discussion keeps circling back to missed close-range opportunities, layups, and free throws, the kinds of finishes expected to be automatic for a player with her size and physical profile. At 6 feet 3 inches with her strength and athletic ability, finishing around the rim is supposed to be a foundation of her game, not an area of concern. Yet it continues to be the most scrutinized part of her offensive profile. Across game after game, preseason after preseason, the pattern remains the same. Rebounds and defensive impact are acknowledged, but the conversation repeatedly returns to missed shots. When inefficiency becomes the dominant storyline after a performance, it signals that perception is being shaped less by totals and more by how those totals are produced. Excitement surrounded her opportunity, and the league itself added more attention to the moment with every possession. There were flashes in the game where she impacted plays on both ends, grabbing rebounds, finishing a putback, and drawing contact at the rim to earn free throws. Those sequences showed her physical presence still translates into production in certain areas, even when the offensive rhythm is inconsistent. But the focus quickly shifted back to the larger context surrounding the night, particularly the 3,000 empty seats that became impossible to ignore. The lack of turnout in Chicago did not happen suddenly. It was the result of a build-up over time, through a difficult 10-34 season that offered little success, through a suspension that played out publicly and created tension with the organization, and through an eventual departure that felt less like a clean break and more like a relationship reaching its natural endpoint. Fans absorbed all of that history, and it influenced how they responded when she returned. So when a significant portion of the local audience chose not to attend a highly publicized preseason game, it reflected more than a single decision. It pointed back to everything that had already happened leading up to that moment. The question was not whether people were aware of her return, but how they interpreted everything that came before it. On the broadcast, the possession-by-possession breakdown reinforced the same narrative patterns that have followed her games. Drives ending in misses, close-range attempts that do not fall, and stretches where the efficiency struggles become more visible than the counting stats. In that way, the game itself and the attendance around it began telling the same story from different angles, one on the floor and one in the stands. A 28% shooting night, 7 rebounds, and 2 assists set the statistical tone for the performance, but the broader conversation around Angel Reese extends far beyond a single box score. Within the same 2025 WNBA season, marked by a 10-34 record for Chicago, a mid-season suspension, and a second straight year missing the playoffs, other franchises were experiencing a very different reality. The Indiana Fever, for example, were expanding into larger venues due to demand exceeding capacity. Across the league, teams such as the Atlanta Dream, Connecticut Sun, and Dallas Wings also shifted select games into NBA-sized arenas to accommodate rising attendance levels, reflecting a league that was, in many places, experiencing measurable growth in fan interest. For the 2026 season, projections showed 39 of the Indiana Fever's 44 regular season games being played in NBA-level arenas, underscoring how significantly certain markets had expanded. These figures do not interpret meaning, they simply document attendance at scale. That contrast is often used in wider discussions about how different teams and players draw audiences in different ways, even within the same growing league. At the same time, the narrative around Reese's own transition to a new team and new environment centers on adjustment and expectation. She has spoken about the support she receives from teammates and coaches, the confidence placed in her role, and the ongoing process of adapting her shot selection and offensive decision-making at the professional level. There is an acknowledgement that development is still ongoing, particularly in areas where efficiency has been a recurring topic of discussion. As the new season begins in Atlanta, attention naturally shifts toward how her game evolves in a different system and setting. The previous season's struggles, the suspension, and the external noise all remain part of the backdrop, even if no longer directly in front of her. In professional sports, those experiences do not disappear. They become context that follows players into every new chapter. The question moving forward is not just about narrative, but about whether performance can begin to align more consistently with expectation over time. Right now, both the on-court results and the in-arena response are moving in a direction that is difficult to separate from each other in the broader conversation around her. The shooting issue remains the most discussed part of her offensive game, not because of isolated performances, but because of a consistent pattern that shows up across multiple games. At this level, development is not defined by flashes or single possessions. It is defined by whether efficiency can be sustained when defenses adjust, pressure increases, and opportunities become harder to recreate. An offensive profile cannot depend heavily on repeated second chances generated from missed attempts, because over time that places additional strain on possessions and limits overall scoring efficiency. Eventually, the initial finish has to become more reliable if the offensive impact is going to translate into consistent winning production rather than fluctuating stretches. At the same time, the attendance figure in Chicago on April 29th has become part of the same wider discussion, not because it defines the entire fan base or the entire season, but because it reflects how performance, perception, and engagement can overlap in professional sports. The 3,000 empty seats were not the result of a single simple explanation like scheduling conflicts, weather conditions, or promotional timing. Instead, they are often interpreted as part of a longer buildup of context. Team performance, public narratives, roster changes, and prior seasons all contributing to how fans choose to respond in the moment. Whether viewed as disengagement, frustration, or simply shifting interest, the absence became another data point in how that specific game was received. In that sense, what happens on the court and what happens in the stands begin to inform each other. The statistical output of a game and the turnout around it are both forms of feedback, even if they come from different places. Together, they contribute to a larger picture that is shaped less by interpretation and more by observable outcomes. How the game is played, how it is received, and how both elements evolve over time within the same competitive environment.